In this session, we're going to talk about LDAP integration. And to get started here on the top of your product, you're going to want to go to Control Panel, Portal Settings, and then Authentication. So once you get into the Control Panel, the Portal Settings is over on the left. And then once you're in this screen, you can click on Authentication, and that will give you the screen we see here in the middle. First thing we want to do is check the Enabled button here so that we can start pulling in that information from LDAP. Second thing here is to go to the Add, LDAP Servers Add, and you'll be offered a variety of LDAP servers that you can pull in. We're going to use Microsoft Active Directory in this example here, but you can choose your own. And once you've clicked Add, you're going to be presented with a series of screens. And these are really the only screens that you need to be concerned with in terms of getting LDAP working in your environment. The first one here is the connection section. This is going to set up the initial connection to our LDAP server. In the example here, I'm showing LDAPS, an LDAPS URL. But you could be using regular LDAP. Now, we do recommend that you do use LDAPS, but in some cases, just to get you started, it's easier to use the LDAP without the S designation on there. In that case, it's port 389, and you still use your IP address and then port 389. We're going to talk a little bit more about some additional hoops you need to jump to get LDAPS possibly working. That's why I mentioned maybe just trying with LDAP to start. Enter your URL. Enter your base DN. This is basically the location in your hierarchy tree, your LDAP tree. You do need an administrator credential. That's your principal. And then, the LDAP admin username is your principal, and then the credential also is required here. And then you can simply click Test, and you should see Liferay has successfully connected to the LDAP server. This indicates that it's able to use that URL you provided and that information to log in. The second thing we need to do is populate the user section. This is going to tell the product what information to pull out of the LDAP server. First thing is the authentication search filter. You'll see above here it's a lengthy string here, but we see that we're using category person, and then we're mapping the SAM account name to the screen name. And this screen name is actually the screen name that's going to be used inside the product. So we're mapping that LDAP attribute, SAM account name, to a username inside of the product. Second part here is how we are, if you need to specifically designate a specific group within the LDAP hierarchy tree, this is how you would designate that. So you would basically say member of and the common name of that group, and then the remaining path to that group, as shown here. You may not need that. Recommend that you do use it, though. It gives you a little more control over who you're authenticating inside of the product. So you populate that authentication search filter screen. The next one is the screen name. We do want to map that SAM account name to the screen name again here. The next thing is we want to use the user password attribute from LDAP to populate the password inside the product. And then we need to map the mail address attribute here as well to this just mail. And then the full name is going to be the CN. And then the first name is going to be the given name attribute, followed by the last name, which is SN. So these ones that I've highlighted here are really the only ones you need to effectively create an account within the product. So just make sure those are populated. The last thing you can do here is then go to your test to see what you're getting, or if you're able to actually pull information from your LDAP server. And so what you're going to see is this screen that we see here, where we are showing a sampling of the users that we were able to pull in. And you'll notice that these attributes that I've mentioned are also listed here: screen name, email address, first name, last name, password. And so if you see blanks, it means that that user doesn't have all the attributes that are required. And you'll see the note down here below indicating that some may be missing some data. Those users that do not have the data populated will not get imported. So just make sure you have all that information. Once you do have those inside of your LDAP and you've tested successfully, now you can see if those users are coming into the product. All you simply do is go to the normal login screen and log in. And the act of doing so, it may take a little bit of time, maybe 20, 30 seconds the first time you authenticate, because it's going to pull that user in and create that credential against that user. And you'll see here, here's my test user created just like a normal user inside of the product. And you'll see the user group now shows OMNM user, which is the name of that hierarchy tree that I pulled this information from. So really that's all there is to it. You just need each of your users to log in, and they will be created with a user inside of the product. The next set of things we're going to talk about are some things related to LDAPS, and then also how to be more granular also on how you pull users in and assign roles to them. Because by default, you're going to be assigned the role of power user, which is the standard user that all new users get. But you may want to assign specific users or even specific permissions to the roles that are being pulled, of the users that are being pulled in. This screen here is a snapshot. I'm not going to go through all of this. I'm just pointing out here that you may need to do some things with your SSL certificate, depending on how your system works. I'd encourage you to review this screen if you're having problems with LDAPS and make sure that that you have imported the certificates correctly and that this isn't the reason why it may not be working. So just go through this at your own leisure if you need to use LDAPS. Second part of this is you may need to restrict user login to a specific LDAP group. And so this screen here is going to point out how to do that and what screens you need to go to. Now this, again, this is relating back to that first screen that I showed you, and I'll go back here just to reemphasize. It's pertaining to this second half of this string at the top here, where we're talking about pulling in specific members. If you want to be granular to that control, that level of control, then you're going to need to populate the screens as shown here, and you'll see that I'm just showing you how to get to these screens here and what needs to be populated again and why we populate it. So this is going to allow you to go to a specific group within your Active Directory and pull in the users just from that group. In some cases, you may be interested in assigning a default role for all your LDAP users. As I mentioned, the default role for all new users is going to be power user. But if you want to change this so that and create your own roles, and I would encourage you to look at how we use our permissions portlet to create new permissions and new roles with new permissions. This will allow you to basically customize what roles get applied here, but you simply come to this screen, and the path is Control Panel, Portal Settings, Users, Default User Association Roles, and you simply set the roles that you want all new users to receive. It may be that you want all users to receive the administrator role. You would simply add the administrator here, and anybody that authenticates through LDAP would inherit that role. Or you may want to just create your own, as I mentioned, and only have those new users be assigned that role. And on this screen, what I'm pointing out here is that, as we talked about, when you pull in a specific group off of your LDAP hierarchy, that user gets created inside of the product. And so you'll see here, this is the user that gets created. And this allows you then to, if you want to have more granular capability to assign specific roles to these LDAP user groups, you can come in here and do that. You can actually go down to the permissions and assign those to that new group that gets created from that LDAP inherited group. Okay, I hope that was helpful for you, at least as a brief introduction to how we can integrate with LDAP. And I try to keep it short, and so I hope that was helpful. Thanks for watching.